The following days after Victor Lancaster's death felt like I was walking through a fog that would never lift. Every new discovery only deepened the mystery, and every person I interviewed seemed to grow more suspicious. The wealth, the lies, the tangled relationships, all of it created an environment where no one was above suspicion. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mystical stranger, the man who had appeared at the mansion that night, knew something the rest of US didn't. I started by revisiting the scene. Victor's study, where he had been found with a gun in hand, was a cold, sterile room, like something straight out of a designer catalog. No personal touches, no warmth. It was a place where deals were made, and fates were sealed. A place where Victor had kept his most important papers locked away. I had Reed and another officer sweep the house for any clues, and that's when we found something odd, hidden in a drawer behind a collection of legal documents, a small black notebook. It was Victor's. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed, but inside, it contained something chilling, a list of names. There were dozens of them, business partners, rivals, people who had been involved in his various ventures. But the list wasn't what caught my attention. It was the last name. Sophia Lancaster. Victor had written something next to it, something that struck me with a cold wave of realization. Her betrayal will be the end of me. I stared at the words, trying to understand. Betrayal? Sophia was his wife. He loved her. Or, at least, he had. The idea that she would betray him seemed impossible. Yet, the notebook gave the feeling of a man under siege, someone who saw his empire crumbling and was trying to identify the forces that would bring him down. It was clear now that the story wasn't as simple as a murder or suicide. Victor Lancaster had been a man at war, not just with his business rivals, but with those closest to him. The next person I decided to interview was Charles Miller, the closest friend and business partner of Victor Lancaster. Miller was a man whose reputation was larger than life, charming, smooth-talking, always with a plan. On the surface, he appeared the opposite of the dark, brooding character Victor had been. But appearances can be deceiving. I found Miller in his office, sitting behind a large oak desk, sipping coffee as if nothing had happened. He looked up when I entered, his smile faltering for just a second before returning to his usual confident grin. "Sam, I heard about Victor. Tragic, really. We go way back," he said, as though they were long-lost friends rather than business partners whose relationship had soured in recent years. "Yeah," I replied, sitting down across from him. "Tragic. I've got a few questions for you, Charles. If you don't mind." He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, his eyes glinting. "Of course, anything I can do to help. You know that." I studied him carefully. "I need to know about the business dealings between you and Victor, Charles. You two had some issues in the last year. Care to explain?" Miller's expression hardened for just a moment, but he quickly masked it with his usual charm. Victor was the genius, always one step ahead of everyone. But as you know, genius comes with flaws. There were some investments that didn't work out. Bad decisions. I'm sure you're aware of that. I nodded. "So you're saying there was tension between you two, but it wasn't anything serious?" "Nothing serious," Miller said, the words coming too quickly. "Just the usual business disagreements." It was clear he was lying, but I didn't push it further. Not yet. There was something more to Miller's story, but I had to gather the right pieces before I could confront him with the truth. As I left his office, I caught sight of something that caught my attention. A file on his desk, half hidden under a pile of papers. The label on the file read, Project Elysium. It was something I had never heard of before, and I wondered if it had anything to do with Victor's last days. I made a mental note to look into it. The next piece of the puzzle led me straight to Sophia Lancaster, Victor's wife. She was a woman whose beauty matched her intelligence, someone who had stood by her husband's side through thick and thin. Yet, I couldn't ignore the rumors that had swirled around her in the last year. Whispers of an affair. Whispers of betrayal. When I met her, she was in the mansion's garden, sitting in silence, surrounded by the smell of roses and lavender. Her beauty, even in grief, was undeniable. But there was something in her eyes, an emptiness, like she was a woman lost in her own world. "Sophia," I said gently, stepping closer. "I'm sorry for your loss." She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but composed. "Thank you. I didn't expect anyone to visit me so soon after everything. I'm investigating Victor's death," I continued, watching for her reaction. "I need to ask you a few questions." She nodded, her gaze not leaving mine. "I understand. What would you like to know?" "Victor's last days. Were there any signs of trouble? Any indication that he was in danger?" Sophia looked down at her hands, twisting a ring on her finger. "Victor. Victor was always surrounded by danger. He made enemies wherever he went. But recently, he'd become more distant. More secretive. I noticed it, but I thought it was just stress from work. You know how he could be." I pushed further. "Were you aware of any business issues? Personal issues?" Her eyes flashed with something unreadable. Victor had his demons. But they were his demons, not mine. I stayed out of it. Her answer felt too rehearsed, too cold. There was something she wasn't telling me. But I couldn't get her to say more. Not yet. Back at the precinct, I couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious Project Elysium file I'd seen at Miller's office. I spent hours digging through the company's records, trying to find anything related to the project. It was clear it wasn't something open to the public, it was classified, hidden in the deepest recesses of the company's vaults. But finally, I found a lead. Project Elysium was an initiative launched by Victor Lancaster himself, a secretive venture into artificial intelligence, designed to change the course of technology forever. What wasn't clear, however, was why it had been so secret. The more I dug, the more I realized that Project Elysium had the potential to disrupt not just the tech industry, but the entire world economy. And then it hit me, the name, Elysium. The perfect world, the ultimate paradise. The project was meant to be a utopia, but at what cost? Had Victor discovered something so dangerous, something so world-altering, that it led to his death? And why had Miller been involved? I called Miller in for one last meeting, and this time, I wasn't going to back down. The pressure was on, and I needed answers. "Charles, I know about Project Elysium," I said bluntly. "You've been hiding something, and I want to know what it is." For the first time, Miller's confident facade cracked. "You don't understand, Sam. This wasn't just about business. This was about power. Victor wasn't just my partner. He was obsessed with controlling everything. Elysium was his dream, and his curse." I leaned in, my voice low. "And you? What were you going to do with it?" Miller's eyes darted to the door, then back to me. "I was going to use it, Sam. Use it to fix my mistakes." But Victor couldn't let go. He saw it as a tool for control, not a weapon. And that's why he had to die. I was silent for a moment, processing everything he had just confessed. But before I could speak, the stranger appeared again, standing at the door. "You've got the pieces, but you don't see the full picture," he said, his voice calm as always. "There's more to this than you realize. The truth isn't what you think it is. Victor didn't just die, he was erased. The case had more twists than I could have imagined, and the deeper I dug, the more complicated it became. In the end, I didn't just uncover a murder or a suicide, I uncovered a conspiracy, a vision of power that could reshape the world. The mystical stranger vanished, leaving me with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain, Victor Lancaster had died because of his own ambition. And the people who loved him most had been the ones who ultimately betrayed him. And as I looked at the case files, I realized something chilling: the real killer wasn't one person. It was the ambition, the greed, and the betrayal that ran through everyone involved. The people who thought they were above the law were the very ones who caused his death. I sat back in my chair, the weight of the case sinking in. And somewhere, in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mystical stranger was watching, waiting for the next story to unfold.